Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we're dealing with a part of the Bible that many people just skip over because of the subject matter, and it can be a little uncomfortable. You'll seldom hear a sermon preached on some of this, as most pastors can face some backlash from some of the descriptive language that's used. We're talking about Ezekiel chapter 23 and 24. Now, before we get into it, let me make it clear. This isn't a fluffy devotional. These chapters are a disturbing picture of spiritual infidelity and divine judgment, but they're also deeply profound and relevant. But because of some of the graphic nature and the descriptive details that are given, I would advise that you be a little careful if there are young ears around, unless, of course, you're prepared to answer some awkward questions. So let's start with chapter 23. The main point of chapter 23 is to illustrate the spiritual harlotry of God's people, Israel and Judah, using a vivid extended metaphor. Ezekiel tells of two sisters, Oholah, representing the northern kingdom of Israel, and Oholibah, representing the southern kingdom of Judah. These chapters describe their history of unfaithfulness in excruciating detail. They're portrayed as prostitutes who began their harlotry in Egypt and continued with the Assyrians and the Babylonians. What's happening here is not just a story about two women. It's a powerful allegory for idolatry. Allegory? Do you have to throw in those big words that we haven't heard since freshman English in high school? Well, basically, Ezekiel is painting a vivid word picture to make a point about the spiritual depravity of both Israel and Judah, and what led them to this point in their respective histories. God had a covenant with his people, a sacred bond, and they repeatedly broke it by worshiping other gods and making alliances with pagan nations. The language is graphic, and it's meant to be. God, through Ezekiel, is painting a picture of a love affair that has been betrayed in the worst way. It's a full-on, no-holds-barred indictment. Oholah, Israel, is judged first. She's handed over to her former lovers, the Assyrians, who strip her, and they take her children. It's a direct reference to the Assyrian conquest of the northern kingdom. But then the chapter turns its attention to Oholibah, Judah, and the message is chilling. God says that Oholibah saw what was happening to her sister, but instead of learning from it, she became even more depraved. She lusted after the Babylonians, as the text says. Her sin was worse because she committed it with the full knowledge of the consequences that her sister faced. So the main point of Ezekiel 23 is the condemnation of spiritual adultery. It's a lesson that seeing someone else's downfall doesn't guarantee that you'll gain wisdom from it or that you won't learn from it. In fact, it can make your own sin even more egregious. The chapter ends with God's judgment on Oholibah, stating that she too will be handed over to the Babylonians to suffer the same fate. Now let's move on to chapter 25. This chapter hits us with two distinct but connected main points. The first is a parable, and the second is a personal tragedy for Ezekiel himself. The chapter begins with God instructing Ezekiel to tell the people a parable about a boiling pot. The pot represents Jerusalem, and the meat inside the pot, well, that represents the inhabitants of the city. The choicest pieces, the best parts, well, they're the nobles and the wealthy. The rust on the pot represents the city's wickedness and defilement. God says the pot's contents, the people, will be boiled, and the city itself will be burned and cleansed of the rust. This is a very clear prophecy about the siege of the destruction of Jerusalem by the Babylonians. The boiling and the burning, well, they symbolize the intense suffering and the complete destruction that is about to fall upon the city. The heat of the fire is so strong that even the rust, the deeply ingrained wickedness, well, it will be consumed. But the second part of this chapter is even more dramatic. God tells Ezekiel, "Son of man, behold, I am about to take the delight of your eyes away from you with a stroke. This is a prophecy about Ezekiel's wife, the person that he loves the most. Well, she will die suddenly. Then God gives him a command that seems almost impossible. You shall not mourn or weep. Ezekiel's told not to cry, not to beat his chest, or follow any of the traditional mourning rituals of the day. And it happens that very evening. Ezekiel's wife dies. The next morning, he does exactly what God commanded. The people are stunned and they ask him, "What's going on?" Well, just a side note here. I've been asking myself if this was a command that I could keep if it were asked of me. I lost a dear friend last year and it wrecked me. I don't even want to imagine the state I would be in if my wife was taken from me unexpectedly. I'm just being honest here. If this book had been written by me and I was known as the prophet David instead of Ezekiel, well, this story is likely to have a much different ending. But I should get back to Ezekiel. Now, this is where the second main point hits home. Ezekiel explains that his personal tragedy is a living parable for the nation of Israel. Just as his wife was the delight of his eyes, well, the temple in Jerusalem was the delight of their eyes. God was going to destroy it. And when he did, the people would be so grief-stricken, so stunned and shocked, that their sorrow would be too great to bear in public, in a way of public mourning. They would groan in their hearts, but their grief would be too deep for their tears. So in chapter 24, God uses two powerful illustrations: the boiling pot to show the inevitability of Jerusalem's destruction, and the death of Ezekiel's wife to show the profound soul-crushing grief that would accompany it. It's a message that judgment is not a political or a military event only. It's a personal, heartbreaking loss. So, what can we take away from these intense chapters? Well, first, that idolatry is a serious betrayal of God. It's not just a religious mistake, it's a spiritual act of infidelity. Second, that God's judgment, while severe, is just a response to persistent rebellion. And third, God sometimes uses personal tragedies of his servants to deliver a message to his people. It's a heavy set of scriptures, but they serve as a powerful reminder of God's holiness and the serious nature of our relationship with him. You know, it hasn't exactly been a go out and have a nice day message that we often look forward to when we go to read our Bibles. Sometimes, like that medicine your mom gave you when you were a kid, and she would say, "Oh, go ahead and swallow this. It's good for you." Well, sometimes the word's like that too. Thanks for hanging out with me today, and I hope you got something out of today's reading. Please help us out by sharing this channel with someone and help us to encourage others to develop a daily habit in reading God's Word. I'll see you again tomorrow here on Set Sail with Grace Harbor. God bless you.